Donald Trump, again the dominant name on the political landscape this day, even as the other 16 Republican candidates try to figure out how to fight back. Here's some of what we heard today.
Donald Trump may not be a politician, but he's sure acting like a politician in this regard.
Can you catch Donald Trump? He seems to be running away with this.
I'm not particularly trying to catch anybody. What I am doing is steadily getting the message out.
He's using the talking points of the Democrats. Those talking points haven't worked in the past 4.5 years.
In many ways, it's just too simplistic. You know, the idea of, building a wall, kicking everybody out.
I filed legislation to triple the Border Patrol. I was very glad to see that Donald Trump agrees with that proposal.
Let's bring in John Nichols, who is a Washington correspondent for The Nation, and Matt Welch, editor-in-chief at Reason Magazine. With a welcome to you both. Matt, I spoke with you a few weeks ago, and I think it's pretty fair to say that you expressed some outrage at the early Donald Trump phenomenon. So how do you explain it weeks later?
I think that we always knew that this race on the GOP side especially was going to feature a lot of anti-establishment sentiment because the GOP itself has had a ton of that since 2008, and it had never expressed itself in the presidential process. What I underestimated for sure is that there are different types of anti-establishmentarianism, right? The Tea Party kind of libertarian fiscal conservative type. There's the Ted Cruz tactical, I'm going to throw a fit and shut down the government type. But this is a different type. This is we're going to burn the mother down type of anti-establishment feeling where it doesn't even matter if you were a Democrat 3 weeks ago. As long as you say that you're against the media, you're against the establishment, and you want to build a 75,000-mile wall, then suddenly you can tap into that anti-establishment sentiment. So I think that is the surprise here.
You know, John, to Matt's point, to a degree, in some respects at this race, at this point, it appears to be the Trump brand versus the Clinton brand. She's limiting access to the media, hoping reporters will beg off in one case, but he's holding news conferences regularly, appearing on many of the Sunday talk shows, by phone even. I mean, he's all over the place. Is this becoming a battle of brands as opposed to a battle over issues?
Sure. I think that's a big part of it. And I very much respect a lot of what Matt just said. I think that's very important about the anti-establishment character of this. But we should also understand something about the importance of your use of the term brand. Donald Trump understands how contemporary political coverage plays out. We begin to cover presidential races much earlier than we used to. We get very focused on them, and then our media needs to be, and I put quote marks around this, fed on a daily basis. Donald Trump understands that a big part of maintaining his brand is to spin something new out every morning, to have a new attack, something that is newsworthy. And so he's really dominating this. And it's interesting to me that I think Hillary Clinton, running a much more old-fashioned campaign, certainly she has a brand, there's no doubt of that, but not pushing it in anywhere near the same level of intensity and level of focus. Trump is really campaigning via media. So have the lines been completely blurred then between politicians and entertainers? I mean, let's face it, that's where Donald Trump has come from. I mean, granted, he's also a businessman, but given The Apprentice and everything else, Miss Universe, the rest of it.
Well, I think that what we're seeing here is possibly a new thing in American politics, which is a much more European-style kind of right-wing, but still big government social populism of the kind of Le Pen style, where you have a great man who's just going to fix the problems because he's great. He's going to be out greater than the other people, and he's going to be directed outwards towards immigrants and towards other parts of the population that are seen to be causing decay from within. We have built over hundreds of years kind of antibodies against that style of politics in America. So I think the real question in this election is that over now? Do we have that kind of temptation for populism within this country? I would have bet a no, certainly 2 months ago, and now I'm starting to hedge.
John, in this New York Times article that is out about why Donald Trump won't fold, the polls and the people speak, there is a line I keep looking at. Trumpism, the data and interviews suggest, is an attitude attitude, not an ideology. At what point do you think voters will stop listening to attitude and bravado and great one-liners and feeding the media, as you describe it, and really look for substance and fact and policy and what you actually plan to do?
Well, that's a very good question, and of course Matt just laid it out well. He said a couple weeks ago I could have given you one answer. I might give you another one today, because we have seen points at which I thought Donald Trump crossed the line and would have really started to lose a lot of those voters who, in a lot of these polls, are very well screened. They're trying to figure out who's going to vote in a Republican primary, participate in a Republican caucus. And I thought what he said about McCain was going to be a tripwire. I thought when you go after a Fox News host, I thought that might be problematic. The fact is that Trump has continued to maintain a great deal of strength. So rules are being rewritten, but I will counsel you, I've covered a lot of Iowa caucuses. Those are not high turnout events. Those are events at which the people who come to them have to stay for a long time, talk about a lot of issues. They tend to be very focused in that way. And so Trump may actually make it all the way to Iowa and then perhaps see a trip. But this is important. With this many candidates, if the field remains this big, Trump might even make it through that.
Matt, you were mentioning the anti-establishment passion overtaking the GOP, and as a result, there's this Trump and Carson level leading the GOP field, about which you write. To call this a clown car is to disparage the work of pantomime professionals. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have Hillary Clinton, the one-time absolute lock for Democratic nominee, now threatened by this email matter. So I ask, does the American electorate have any clear choices from any perspective?
No, thank God, I guess on some level. Hillary Clinton faces the problem that the Jeb Bush faces on the Republican side. Americans, God bless us, don't like coronations, right? And so I think a lot of the Bernie Sanders bump here is just a reaction to having an overwhelming frontrunner who's kind of pre-kneecapped all the Democratic opposition beforehand. It'll be interesting to see whether anybody with juice, and there's not a lot of people on the Democratic side who have juice, really, thinks about getting in, because I think Hillary Clinton is both dominant and vulnerable, not just the email thing, but just because she does not generate any kind of love or a tingle down the leg, in a memorable phrase, among the Democratic base in the way that others might. And
John, what's your take? I mean, explain the American electoral landscape. Is it the same as it ever was, or is this something entirely different?
No, it's constantly evolving. The biggest mistake people make is to look backward and say, oh, I see an example here that will help me understand what's going on now. You know, if you do that, you can't imagine a Franklin Roosevelt in 1932, in the midst of a depression, you elect a wealthy guy to take on the wealthy, or even a Ronald Reagan in 1980. The fact is that our politics keeps moving forward, giving us new options, new twists, and new turns. What's important to understand is I don't like this line that says it's too late for people to get into this race. We haven't reached the filing deadlines. We haven't even reached the first debate on the Democratic side. So I think the reality is that there is room for people to get in. But I would counsel one thing on Bernie Sanders. I don't think it's just a kind of reaction against a coronation, or to use Matt's phrase. I think there's also, especially on the Democratic side, there's a host of issues and movements that have developed around a $15 wage, around economic inequality, around wage stagnation in general, around trade policy, that those issues have not had good expression at the top levels of the Democratic Party. And Sanders has brought that into the Democratic race, and I think he's attracted a good deal of support that is issue-based.
All right. Well, John Nichols and Matt Welch, good to see you both. Thank you so much, guys. Appreciate it.
Pleasure.
Straight ahead, another air show tragedy. What went so wrong?
As it crashed into the traffic lights,